Hello, everyone, and happy Tuesday. It's Tuesday, right? Happy Tuesday. I'm excited to be here. I appreciate all of you joining me, those who are going to join me live, as well as those who catch the replay. The reason I wanted to do this was because emotional intelligence is kind of a buzzword, right? It's this new hot topic. Everyone's talking about emotional intelligence, and I often hear people talk about emotional intelligence as if it is just this one idea or concept where you either have it or you don't. And so what happens is people will talk about emotional intelligence, but they don't really understand what they're talking about. And that can lead to confusion. That can lead to people asking questions or they don't even fully grasp what they're trying to ask. So what I really wanted to do was just come on here once a week and have an emotional intelligence ask me anything. But really it's emotional intelligence and mental health. So I'm excited to be here. I appreciate everyone joining me. You can ask me anything, just put it in the comments. Ask me any question you like. Emotional intelligence, mental health. You can ask me about specific mental health disorders. You can ask me about treatments. You can ask me about different domains of emotional intelligence. Ask me anything, ask away. You can make it as personal as you want. You can be a general question, whatever's on your mind, whatever's on your heart, ask me. I'm here for you. I'm excited. And this is going to be a weekly thing. So if you're catching the replay and you have a question, I mean, you can send me a DM, you can reach out to me directly, or you can wait until next week and ask your question. Either way, I'm excited to be here to answer your questions and serve you because really I look at what I do as an emotional intelligence life coach. I look at the people that I serve and I wanted to serve more people. You see, I have different programs and packages. But not everybody wants that. Sometimes you just have a question. There's just something that's been on your mind that you wanted to address. And so I wanted to provide an avenue where you can ask your questions, have them answered, and then maybe that moves you forward, whether it's in your learning, your growth, your healing, whatever it is. I just wanted to serve you and be more available to answer your questions. And so I have a few questions already that have been asked by some people. And so I'm going to jump into those here in a minute. I do want to reiterate, drop your questions in the comment section and I'll answer them right now. But again, I want to get started. I don't know how long I'm going to be on. It depends on how many questions I have. So there may be days where this is an hour or so. There may be days where this is 15, 20 minutes. I don't plan it like that. My plan is just to be available and to answer your questions. And so, with that said, I'm going to jump right in. First, I want to talk about what emotional intelligence is, and I like to describe it in regards of the different domains of emotional intelligence because emotional intelligence is not just a singular item where you have it or you don't. Emotional intelligence is made up of four different domains, and I like to explain them because people have different levels of emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence can be applied to different aspects of your life in different ways. There are lots of people who are very emotionally intelligent, but they don't know that because they haven't really thought about these concepts. But when I describe these concepts, you'll realize that it's how you live your life. And so, good for you and good for the people that, you surround yourself with. So, first of all, I want to talk about the domains of emotional intelligence. Basing this off of the four domains of emotional intelligence as listed by Dr. Daniel Goleman in his book, Emotional Intelligence, written in 1995. And I say that because there's not a standard definition of what emotional intelligence is. Some things do have standard definitions. For example, a lot of people can feel depressed, but there is a thing called major depressive disorder, and what it is outlined in the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, fifth edition. And so a lot of people may say they're depressed, but major depressive disorder has specific criteria. Emotional intelligence doesn't. There's different models of it, there's different ways of describing and explaining it. So I've chosen to align with this specific model described by and explained by Dr. Goldman in 1995. So the four domains of emotional intelligence are self-awareness, and self-awareness is really knowing what you feel, why you feel that way, and how you express and experience those emotions. And when I say how you express those emotions, it's that's external, how you communicate your emotions to other people. And how you experience emotions is internal. How do you feel within your body when you are feeling certain emotions? And when I talk about what you feel, it's really your ability to describe or label the emotion that you're feeling. You see, we go through a lot of emotions, but have you ever felt like you're off? Off is not an emotion, but you're feeling off. So what's going on is you don't really know of the word to describe what you're feeling. Well, emotional intelligence, first domain, self-awareness is being able to label that emotion. And if you know what you feel, then you can dig into why you feel that way. And then you can look at how you express and experience those emotions, right? And then the second domain is emotion regulation. So I've modified this to some degree because in Dr. Goleman's book, he describes it as emotion regulation, but in reality, emotions are physiological. So I look at not as emotion regulation, but self-regulation because it's not just how you feel, right? Like sometimes when you feel something, people say it's all in your head, and that's just not true because you feel emotions throughout your entire body. There's certain sayings that we have that actually are rooted in fact depending on how you experience the emotions. For example, when you say that felt like a gut punch, I was so stressed out. I felt like I had this weight lifted off my shoulders, or an elephant was sitting on my chest. Things like that. Even crying tears of joy are the proof that emotions are physiological. So self-regulation is really your ability to influence what you feel, why you feel that way, and how you experience and express those emotions. And that definition is actually from Dr. James Gross, who's a professor of psychology at Stanford University, and he came up with that definition during research that he was doing in 1998. Um, so again, self-regulation is really regulating the whole body, not just what you feel, but the way you feel it within your body. Then the next domain out of the four, the next domain of emotional intelligence is social awareness. And empathy is a part of social awareness. So when we're talking about social awareness is really just being able to recognize what's going on around you within your circle, right? And then there's different levels of the circle, right? Such as your inner circle who's closest to you, out to maybe your family, your community, the nation, the world as a whole, right? There's really no limit to that. But I look at it in terms of building or chronological, right? Where you cannot really have great social awareness if you do not have great self awareness. So, first, you have to understand your own emotions and be able to regulate or influence those emotions. And that frees up the resources in your mind and in your heart and in your body. It frees up those resources to be aware socially of other people's emotions, of the way that they react to you, which brings us specifically to empathy. Now, when I teach emotional intelligence, when I'm speaking in front of crowds or whatever, and I talk about social awareness, my emphasis is always more on empathy because empathy is really the critical component of anything that you want to do in life. Your ability to relate to others, the ability to relate to their emotions, because sometimes you did not experience what they experienced, but you know what it's like to feel what they're feeling. And so that puts you in a position to be empathetic. But empathetic is not just seeing it from someone else's perspective. Empathetic also means being able to communicate to them. How do I communicate to you that I know how you feel? I understand this emotion. And I need to be able to communicate that to you in a way that's non judgmental. I need you to understand that I'm relating to you, that I'm connecting with you. And so if you don't understand our connection, if you don't understand that I'm relating to the emotion that you're experiencing, Maybe I lack empathy. Maybe I need more practice. Maybe I need to find another way to connect. But understand empathy is not a tool that you use when someone is feeling down. Empathy really is about the shared emotional experiences. And so an empathetic person can also be very excited and happy for you when you win. They can be there for you when you struggle. They can be there for you when you win. They can just carry your burden even when you're doing great things. They can share in that with you to help you reach your goals. And then the last domain of emotional intelligence is relationship management. When I think of relationship management, it's really the way that you navigate your relationships in a way that's favorable really to the relationship. So it's not about you winning or the other person winning because it's not a battle, it's not a contest or competition. Relationship management is about nurturing the relationship. And so emotional intelligence enables us to do this in certain ways. And I'll give you an example. When you are having a disagreement with someone, and the way that you can manage the relationship through the disagreement is understanding, first of all, your self awareness, right? Why do you feel what you feel? Why am I angry? Why am I disappointed? What is causing me to feel this way? Is it because of something that's irrelevant? For example, you say something to me and I'm triggered because of something that happened a couple years ago. Well, self awareness lets me know that um, I'm experiencing an emotion that's not based on the current situation. And so Charlene says, good afternoon. Hello, Charlene. Thank you for being here. She's an awesome person. Anyone watching this, definitely follow Charlene here on LinkedIn. She's been very supportive. I appreciate you. So back to my example. So first you recognize within yourself, why do I feel this way? Are these emotions and my reactions appropriate for the situation? And when you get a handle on that, that gives you the freedom or the bandwidth to then look at the disagreement as a whole and then understand the other person. And sometimes you have to think the reason they're acting this way is momentary, it's temporary. I know your heart, I know your intentions, I understand your values, I understand your perspective. And so then what I'm able to do is use all of that data, that information to reframe this disagreement into something where we both are able to address our values instead of attempting to win. So to me, that's really the foundation of what emotional intelligence is four domains. And when you think about these four domains, again, self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, and relationship management, when you look at these four different domains, you realize that there are different pieces of emotional intelligence that can be applied at different points or different events in your life. So it's not like emotional intelligence is a tool that you deploy here and not there. Kind of like, for example, your understanding of algebra. You don't turn it off or turn it back on if the situation requires it. You use it. If not, you don't use it, but it's not a tool that's stored away somewhere. You always have that knowledge, you always have that skill. And so, with that said, I want to jump into the first question. I have them written down, so I'm going to be looking down at my notebook. Um, but the first question is, can emotional intelligence be learned or developed? And the answer is yes. And I'm excited to say that because emotional intelligence isn't something that you just have or you don't. And I've seen that in a lot of conversations where people will say, you don't have emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is not something that you possess, it's not an item, it's not a tool. It's a foundation of your personality, right? And so when you have emotional intelligence, as a foundation, you can align your values and your goals with emotional intelligence and enables you to manage your relationships working towards a goal and enables you to manage your own emotions as you go through whatever struggles you're dealing with. And so sometimes you may find yourself feeling a certain way, and you're not sure why you feel that way. You may find out that your emotions or reactions in a certain situation are not appropriate. And you do that by going back and looking at yourself, right? Just doing a an audit of your behavior. And then what you do is you can sit there and think, I should have done this. I should not have been so angry. I shouldn't have yelled at this person. In that moment, you're elevating your emotional intelligence. You're going back thinking about what you should have done. You're evaluating your emotions and your behavior that are tied to those emotions. You can go back and think, or maybe you get new information about what that other person is going through. And you say, man, I didn't know that. I didn't know you just experienced that. And so then you learn the power of empathy. You learn that when it comes to social awareness, I should get more information. I should be more open, more available. Maybe I should do more listening the next time I have a disagreement with someone. And so those are examples of how you can develop emotional intelligence. There's things that you can do in the moment, and there's also long-term forms of developing emotional intelligence. There's courses you can take online, and you can also just come to me and we can have that conversation. And I can teach you emotional intelligence and I can help you apply it to different aspects of your life. Specifically finding your purpose. I can help you navigate your career or your relationship using emotional intelligence. And when I say that, I'm not talking about pulling out the emotional intelligence tool. I'm talking about how you communicate, how you express your emotions, your ability to listen with empathy and not judgment. These are skills that you can develop over time. You have the ability to look back and say, I wasn't listening the way that I should have. I didn't have empathy in the moment like I should have. And those are opportunities for you to learn. And so, what you do is instead of judging yourself, you hold yourself accountable to go learn and develop your emotional intelligence. So, back to the original question, can emotional intelligence be learned or developed? And the answer is yes. It takes practice, it's a journey, and no one ever gets to the point where they can no longer improve, right? Nobody is at a point where they are as empathetic as possible and they can never be more empathetic. Nobody has ever gotten to the point where they are the perfect listener. And the reason I say that is because our emotions impact all of this, right? So having emotional intelligence does not mean that your emotions are perfect and appropriate for every situation. Emotional intelligence is about you recognizing within yourself how you feel, what are you doing, what should you have done differently, and then choosing to grow. There's so many different concepts and ideas that we can align with emotional intelligence, like a growth mindset, choosing to learn more about yourself. So, for example, when you're triggered by something, you have this emotional reaction that you don't understand, and you want to know why, and you begin to dig deep about why you're reacting that way. In that moment and through that journey, you're elevating your self awareness. So, you are working on emotional intelligence. And I say that to you because a lot of people may not understand exactly what emotional intelligence is, but they are aware of their emotions. They do audit their emotions in the good and the bad situations and environments. And they are very good at being empathetic listeners. So maybe you don't have a quantitative score on how emotionally intelligent you are, but you can be proud of the fact that you're able to connect with people and you're able to really nurture relationships and encourage people and elevate them and make them feel valued. That's part of emotional intelligence. So, another question was asked, can children and teenagers develop emotional intelligence? And how do they do that? And again, the answer is yes. So, first of all, children and teenagers go through the same things that we go through. And that's one thing I think adults and parents have to learn is that we have to give young folks the opportunity to explore their emotions. A lot of times we will correct them on their emotions, and really there are no good and bad emotions, right? Like there's a time and place for anger, there's a time and place for sadness, for grief. If you feel betrayed in your job, Someone's supposed to have your back and they let you down. Maybe they blamed something on you or they took credit for something that you did. You should be angry. Anger is not a bad emotion. Or maybe you really trusted them, so you're disappointed. Maybe you should be disappointed. So those are not bad emotions. There are no good or bad emotions. The fact is, if happiness was the only emotion you ever felt, then happiness would have no value. You need to experience the full range of emotions, and you can't just suppress the bad emotions. Our bodies and minds don't work like that. You either suppress emotions or you don't. So if you're really good at turning off sadness, then you're going to struggle with joy in joyous situations as well. So you have to really fully feel and embrace your emotions. And so when we're talking about teenagers and children, quite often we don't allow them to fully engage in their emotions. And I'm sure we all have memories of that, right? When you're told, don't cry, don't be mad. Why are you upset? What are you mad about? Right. And then the all-time favorite, right? I'll give you something to cry about. I'll give you a reason to be mad. And so what happens in those moments is we don't allow the children to fully feel and experience their emotions. And what we could do in those situations is two things. We hold them accountable for their behavior. Because I said that there are no bad emotions, but there can be negative behavior tied to those emotions. When you're really angry and you punch a hole in the wall, the anger is not a bad emotion. Property damage is, especially when you're a kid and it's your mama's house. That's not the time to go breaking stuff. You didn't pay for anything, right? And so we can hold them accountable for their behavior, but the emotion of anger is not something to be punished for. We have to help them understand their anger. Why did it make you so angry? And a lot of young people have difficulty communicating their perspective on things. They have difficulty with with communicating their emotions. And so we can help them develop emotional intelligence by helping them communicate their emotions. And one way that we do that, probably I would say the most important way to do that, is to let them fully know and understand that conversations with us are safe spaces. You are free to express your frustration, your overwhelm, your anger, your sadness. You are free to do that. The way that you raise them, the way that you deal with them, should be teaching them that there's appropriate behaviors that go with those emotions. But we can't tell them you're not allowed to be angry. We can't tell them you're not allowed to be sad. Then they get in the practice of suppressing those emotions. And so some of you watching this maybe think that the way that you handle certain emotions is just to bury it. And so think about how that has impacted you throughout your lifespan. What good has it done for you to suppress anger, to suppress hurt, to bury it and just keep it stored away? How has that helped you? The answer is it hasn't helped you. Maybe in a specific situation it did, right? Sometimes maybe you can't show fear. I understand that. But when you bury it, when you suppress it and take it with you, it weighs on you and weighs you down. And so we don't want our children to learn those techniques. What we want is for our children to understand that they have to process their emotions. So, yes, children can develop emotional intelligence, but it starts with us. You have to create the safe space for them. You have to let them know that you are available to open communication about their emotions. Another thing you have to do to help children and teens develop emotional intelligence is develop your own emotional intelligence. You cannot be effective screaming at a child about them being mad. So, is anger appropriate or not? You're angry at me for being angry? Now the child is confused, but they don't know how to tell you that. And maybe it's not a safe space for them to say to you, why are you so angry at me for being angry about this? So you have to develop your own emotional intelligence. You have to develop your own self awareness. You have to be able to regulate your own emotions. So when your kids see you doing things like the gratitude journal, mindfulness meditation, box breathing, tapping, all of these different things that you can do to regulate your emotions in the moment. When they see you do that, it shows them that they also have the power to identify and feel their emotions and then choose their response. They don't have to have the tantrum, they don't have to have the outburst, but they don't know how to regulate those emotions. So they watch you, they see what you're doing. And so give them a good example. Elevate your emotional intelligence and then connect with them. When they're feeling a certain way, get them to fully explain, fully understand their emotions. A lot of times when we see young people acting out, it's because they don't know how to identify the emotion. And because they don't know how to identify it, they don't know how to identify a way to resolve that emotion. They don't know how to find a way to get over that obstacle. And so, what we want to do is demonstrate to them by elevating our emotional intelligence, and we want to create safe spaces for them. A dysregulated adult cannot co regulate a child. Manage your emotions, manage yourself, lead by example, lead with love with your children and teens, and then they will be able to develop emotional intelligence throughout their lifespan. So, another question I have is, what is the difference between emotional intelligence and intelligence quotient? So, intelligence quotient is IQ. And emotional intelligence sometimes is called EI for emotional intelligence or EQ for emotional intelligence quotient, really to compare EQ and IQ. And here's the thing, IQ is static for the most part. And what I mean by that is you can move it up and down a couple numbers, but it's primarily based on the way that you process information. And so you can elevate your ability to process information by practicing processing certain bits of information. And when I say that, let me give you an example. If you love science, but science is hard for you, maybe it's because you don't have a lot of practice processing that data, analyzing that data, that information. So you practice it, and then you get good at processing that information by analyzing that data. But as you improve your ability to do that, you really don't move the needle very much on your IQ. What you're doing is maximizing the abilities that you already have, as opposed to elevating your abilities. So I'm not going to tell you that nobody can elevate their IQ, but what I'm telling you is that if you have an IQ of, say, 121, which I believe is slightly above average, if your IQ is 121, you're not going to go practice elevating your IQ daily to get your IQ from 121 to 160 or 180 or off the charts. And so, because it's fairly static, if you take an IQ test, say as a child or in your teens, you can take the same IQ test 20, 30 years later, and you can have your PhD, you can be an engineer, you can be a scholar, you can be a professor, but you'll find that your IQ has not shifted 20, 30, 40 points. And at the same time, if your IQ is, say, 120 or 125, again, I believe that's above average. If that's your IQ, and then you find yourself in situations where you can't seem to figure it out, you can't come up with the answer, your IQ didn't get worse. Again, it's processing information that maybe you're not used to processing. So you can develop that skill, that analytical skill for that topic, but your IQ doesn't drop because something is difficult for you. So IQ is pretty much static because it's more genetic than anything, and it's really about how you process information. And if you really want to learn more about IQ, I suggest that you just go look it up, right? Go Google it. What I tend to do on different subjects is I will go and actually put in the search bar research studies, because I don't want a lot of people's opinions. I want the actual data. I want the actual empirical evidence. So you can do that and look it up for yourself to learn more about IQ. But the difference between IQ and EQ is that IQ is pretty static, and EQ, emotional intelligence, is not static. As I stated earlier, you can develop emotional intelligence. There are specific skills that you can develop and work on and get better at. So you can be more empathetic than you were a year ago through intentional practice of empathy. You can be more self aware, and you can do these things even with journaling. You can just write it down. What were your emotions? I like to talk about the four primary emotions, right? Happiness, sadness, anger, and fear. And so when I'm looking at those four primary emotions, you can journal that and you can say, what emotion have I felt most often in the last 7 days? Well, I felt fear. Okay. Why did you feel that way? Why did you feel fear? Then you can analyze that and say, was fear the appropriate response? And a lot of people say things like, well, I don't live in fear. I'm not going to live in fear, so on and so on. But it happens. Maybe you're in fear of losing your job, or maybe there's someone that you love who's been sick and you're afraid they're going to get worse. Fear is a valid emotion. I mean, there are times where we've had someone we've loved in the hospital for, from 7 days to 7 months, and we've felt some semblance of fear the entire time. That is a valid and appropriate emotion. And you being able to recognize that and give yourself grace for that is one way to develop your emotional intelligence. For example, when I say give yourself grace, I mean maybe you made some uncharacteristic decisions during that time. Maybe you had some overreactions. Well, if you're living in fear, if you're afraid of something, it impacts your decision making process. So be aware of that, right? That's that emotion regulation, that's that self awareness. And so emotional intelligence can be developed and you can get better at it over time, whereas IQ is pretty static. And so the last question that I have is, how do I know when to use emotional intelligence? And their answer is that there really is no correct answer of when to use emotional intelligence. It's something that you have, right? And so, for example, it's like, when do I use kindness? Well, kindness should always be one of your first options. Empathy should always be one of your first options. You should always be looking and striving to be aware of what you feel and why you feel that way. And so there's really never a time where you turn on emotional intelligence and you say, now is a good time for me to figure out what I feel. You should always be mindful of your emotions. And when you do that, then you can be mindful of why you responded a certain way. And you can say, my actions or reactions in this moment were not appropriate. And so that is not you turning on emotional intelligence in the moment. That's you building the habit of being self-aware and mindful of your emotions throughout the day and hence throughout the lifespan, right? And even with empathy, I'll tell you this, right? This is what I want people to understand. Not everybody deserves your empathy, right? Not everybody deserves your kindness all the time. And I'm not saying to do people wrong. What I'm saying is that maybe sometimes you need to focus on your own emotions. Maybe your efforts to be empathetic towards someone else or in another situation are bringing you down. So self awareness enables you to feel within your body that this doesn't feel right. Something's going on here that I'm not comfortable with. And so then, you set your boundaries and you decide what you will or will not tolerate or put up with. And then from those boundaries, because you are emotionally intelligent, because you do have self awareness, because you're able to regulate your emotions and your entire mind body connection, then you can make a decision that's right for you in the situation based on your values, your perspective, your purpose. So it's not about when do I use emotional intelligence and when do I not use it. It's really more about being aware of who you are, being aware of your values and your emotions. Does this align with who I am? or who I want to be. And so from there, you can really begin to just really develop emotional intelligence in a way that really elevates your life, elevates your happiness, and positively impacts your relationships, your career, and your future across the lifespan. So those are the only questions I have that were submitted to me today to be answered. Well, I was actually given another question by someone else. And then I went back and looked on LinkedIn and I was unable to locate that question. So if you submitted a question to me and it did not get answered, I'm going to be in touch. And then I can just answer that question for you directly. But with that said, thank you for everyone watching, joining me, whether you watched live or on the replay. Thank you very much for being here. And I'm going to be here every week. So if you have any questions, you can send them to me. You can DM me. You can send me a message on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Um, just reach out to me. Let me know your questions about emotional intelligence or mental health. If you want, we can talk about mental health disorders. We can get into depression or anxiety or PTSD. We can talk about trauma. We can dig into all of those things. And at the same time, if you don't want to ask those questions, either publicly or if you don't want the 5 minute answer, know that I am an emotional intelligence life coach. I'm a certified trauma professional, and we can work one on one, and I can help you on your journey to elevating your happiness so that you can really begin to build and live the life that you desire and deserve. That's what I want to do. I want to see you happy because you deserve to be happy. I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you, and I will see all of you next time. Thank you again.